Hello.
Oh, hi.
Hi.
Hi, Carrie.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm doing well.
Good.
See, we're gathering people, which is good.
Yeah.
Hi, Michael.
Hi, Jeff. How are you?
Good. Good. How are you?
Considering all in all, no reason to complain.
Yeah. Good to see we're all still here.
Very positive signs that like this thing is gonna peak and go, peak and drop almost as fast as it peaked. So maybe in another month we'll be back to whatever we call normal.
I think it's the new normal.
Yes. So I'm hopeful.
Carrie, do you have any idea how many people are going to probably log on?
I've not heard from any of the bond oversight members that they will not be attending.
They're all
Okay.
here.
So we're almost.
Michael, all of your members are here.
Okay.
Okay. And we have a few guests. Gerardo Cruz, who is our Director of Fiscal, and Melody Kennedy, our Assistant Superintendent, are here. And Ashraf, Kamani, who is our accountant for the bond program,
Okay.
are here. And Serene Abrahamian is here to give us the Brown Act training here in a little bit. She's from Orbach, Huff and Henderson. And
Good evening.
And let's see if there's anybody else who's.
I think Kelly's from the.
Oh, Kelly is from our auditors. Yes.
Okay. Shall we call the meeting to order then?
I think it would be great.
Okay, the meeting's called to order. I don't know if we can do the next agenda item, which is the approval of minutes, because I don't know if everybody has them.
It's also an inaccurate date. There's a couple things on here that appear to be a carryover from previous agendas.
Yep.
That being one of them, and I think you're right. We've agendized something that is not what you're going to be doing. So we might want to table that to the next meeting, and then you'll see down in program updates. It references that we'll be doing a tour of Discovery Building. Clearly, that is not today.
Right. Okay. All right. So obviously, this is not the most up-to-date agenda. So let's move approval of minutes.
Yeah, you want to push that off to the next meeting, right?
Yes, and we'll do both the prior minutes and the minutes from this meeting then.
That's right.
Okay. So let's do that, and then let's get started on number 3, which is the action items, which is the acceptance of the bond, audit reports, measures BBES, and SMS.
Michael, if I could, while we were still on the approval of minutes,
Okay.
one of the things I want to bring up, and there's not really a great place to do it, but I just want to let everybody know that Joan Krennick is no longer, she's not continuing with the committee. Her eligibility for the committee ended when her youngest child graduated and she was no longer involved. So we'll be replacing a person hopefully before the next meeting. But I was going to discuss that when we were reviewing the minutes, but since we're not, I just figured I'd drop it in now.
Okay, so we have theoretically one vacancy then.
We have one vacancy, yes.
Okay.
Okay, so I think now's a good time to move forward. Sorry about that, Michael. Thank you.
I appreciate you letting us know that.
So I'm wondering if Gerardo wants to introduce our auditor and our audit.
Sure, thank you, Carrie, and hello, everyone. My first time to the BOC, so seems like a fantastic time so far. I'll be introducing Miss Kelly Kavanaugh to you. She's one of the partners for our audit firm, Ide Bailey. If you recall, this is going on our second year with this new firm. Kelly is actually another person that is on the team, Shiloh Garospi. She's slated to maybe join us a little late. So if she comes in, they may be tag teaming any questions or comments to the audit. Kelly works very closely with myself and Ashraf in getting into the nitty gritty of all the audits. So a special thank you to Ashraf as well for helping Kelly and Shiloh and the district staff complete the audit. So without further ado, I'll give you Kelly Cavanaugh for a short intro and she'll jump into the audit.
Great.
And we might want to go, I guess, BBES SMS, I guess.
That sounds good. Thank you so much for having me. And as Gerardo mentioned, as soon as Shiloh is available, she'll be taking over. So I'm happy to walk you through the report. I don't have a presentation prepared, but I can walk you through it. I can answer questions. Which do you prefer?
Unless anybody has objections, why don't you just kind of condense us through a walkthrough?
Okay, we'll start with BB.
Okay.
And do you all have the copies of BB available? Okay. All right, so what we consider as auditors, the most important part of the report is the independent auditor's report. And it's important to keep in mind with these bond reports that they aren't a full audit report. They really work in conjunction with the district's audit overall. So if you read the independent auditor's report, which is on page 1 or page 4 of the PDF document, it does mention that our opinion is limited just to the bond financial statements.
And just so I'm looking at the right document, this is a draft of December 2nd, 2021. Is that right?
There's a draft dated January 14th.
Okay, let me make sure.
And I think we just sent
We
that
re-
out a little bit ago.
Yeah, it got sent out less than an hour ago that we just received that.
Kelly,
they
is there any
got
way
the
you can
initial
screen
draft.
share that?
Yeah, if I think Carrie's working on that and I can show it up this.
Oh, okay.
I can screen share it. Hold on a
Great.
moment.
That would be helpful.
Okay. And just tell me how you want to move through it.
Okay, let's scroll down to page 4. And that's the beginning of the auditor's report. And then at the top of page 5, there's an opinion paragraph.
Okay.
So the next page.
All right.
There you go, the opinion. And that's where we state that we feel that the financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the building fund, Measure BB, of the district. And then the emphasis of matter paragraph just down below that addresses what I mentioned earlier, that this is just specific to the Measure BB, not to the district overall. And then, it's a draft, so it says report date. It's there in parentheses. We'll add that date. It will be tomorrow's date, we expect. All right, so then we can scroll on to look at the financial statements. There's the year-end position for the balance sheet that shows that there's still some funds available there, although a lot of the remaining funds are tied up with accounts payable. So this measure is almost complete. Then if we scroll down one more page, we can look at the revenue, which is strictly interest at this, interest in a transfer in from Measure ES. Gerardo, that's correct, right? It's the transfer in from ES, but the source of that was the contribution from Santa Monica College.
Is that the 20? Yes, that's correct. The other financing from ES. Actually, I don't believe that the
that's not-
college.
No.
The college is not in
that's
this one, I don't
This
believe.
is transferring
This-
money from ES to cover BB projects.
Yeah.
I think in ES, you'll see, might have even been SMS. Yes, I think you'll see money
Oh.
transferred in from the college.
Got it. Okay. All right, so there's a quick summary of the expenditures there for this measure. then if you continue, you'll see the notes where we explain various things about the financial statements if you want to read those. And then we move on to discuss the specific balance sheet items, for instance, the investments, which is strictly deposit in the county treasury, receivables, payables, the final commitments there in the fund, which is note 5. And then we go on to some other, we call them reports, but you might call them opinions that are required because it's a governmental audit. So that's what this is. Also the opinion and the emphasis of matter there that states that this is strictly related to Measure BB. You'll see this in each of the reports. And in this one, we were required to disclose if we noted any internal control problems. In this particular measure, BB, there were none. So if you can continue scrolling. And that's where we say we didn't note any internal control issues. There you go.
Thanks.
And then we move on to the performance audit part where we summarize our procedures for the performance audit. There's another opinion related to that. All right, I'm scrolling through my own copy.
Mostly for this committee, this is the important statement.
Yes, we do test expenditures specifically with an eye towards the ballot measure that go with Measure BB, which is generally pretty broad, but we do test specifically to that requirement. And then if you can continue, you'll see on page 20, we do note there's our objectives. The scope, which is basically the entire fiscal year. And then the methodology, where we do note that the Measure B funds are separately accounted for within the general ledger accounting system. The district uses certain coding to specify those bond funds as compared to other bond funds or other unrelated funds. And then you see number 3 there is probably of interest to you, where it says what we tested of the total percent. And then number 4 talks about exactly what we did for that testing.
Yeah, I have a question. Is the 87% of what was tested, is that standard for the type of building fund or for the type of performance audit? Or is this over or below the standard? How is the 87% significant?
We do what we call a materiality calculation based on total expenditures. And we come up with a number and we test every item over that number. So for a performance audit, that percentage tested is much higher than for a regular financial statement audit. Like a financial statement audit, we do sampling. We just test we test a lot of accruals. That's a lot of the basis for our testing.
Kelly, could it also be so high because like in BB, we had basically one project and it was a big one. So our expenditures were large. Each individual expenditure was large. So it probably has a much higher percentage because there's not a lot of little stuff like on most of our measures. Is that a possibility?
Yes. Yeah, like I said, we do that materiality calculation and we just test every item over that.
Thank you.
So yes, it results in a large percentage tested. And there you go, the conclusion. And then if we had had any findings, they would be noted there, but we did not.
Does anyone have any questions for Kelly?
I'd like to see the paragraph where you have the expenditures were in compliance with the ballot measure or something of that nature.
Mhm. Let's see,
was it?
that's
I think that's the methodology.
on page 20 of the PDF, where it says objectives of the audit. There you go.
What
So-
page is that?
20.
20 of the
yeah.
PDF or the numbered page 15.
Oh, 15. Oh,
No, I can't do those, unfortunately.
okay.
That's okay. So that's on Friday.
So number 2
Okay.
there.
All right.
Proceeds have been segregated on the balance and separate bond of the term. The bond procedures have been segregated with some transactions. Okay. Okay, so this indicates where the money is, the bonds have been segregated, deposited, etc. How about, oh, here's the expenditures where charged to the building fund have been made in accordance. Okay, thank you.
Okay,
See that one, all right.
so you would refer to this as a clean audit?
Yes, we
Myself,
don't usually use that phrase, but yes, we didn't find any problems.
Very good. You want to move forward with measure E?
Yeah,
Yes.
let's do that.
Okay. So we have the same setup.
It's going to be very similar, except I think the
Okay.
numbers are a little larger in this one.
Right.
So we'll still have the opinion or the auditor's report.
Okay.
And then, of course, where we note that this was limited just to the building fund and measure ES. And then the same situation exists for ES as for BB, where the district does code all of the activity for this measure ES specifically. And so it's segregated within the general ledger. It's the way they do it, it ends up with a self-balancing set of accounts just for measure ES. So they use their specific coding to do that within the system. So then if we move on to the balance sheet, you'll see much larger numbers. So a larger balance remaining for expenditure in this measure. And then we can look at the revenues and expenditures. And there you see the, oh, go ahead, sorry.
You were gonna say it, go ahead.
I was going to point out the transfer out on this one that shows the transfer to BB of that 16.1 million.
And above is the revenue from SMC you mentioned earlier.
Oh.
There
I
you
have,
go.
I have a question on this page.
Mhm.
So it says the efficiency of revenue over expenditures, meaning we spend more than what we have, or what do you mean?
Yes, well, that's the phrase we use, but of course that's common in a bond fund because you receive the money all at once after the sale of the bonds, and then you spend it over time. So it's common in the bond fund to have revenue come in a lump sum and then to spend it over time. So the years after that money comes in from the sale of bonds, you would always have deficiency of revenue over expenditure. And in fact, the normal place that you see the bond funds come in is in that section, other financing sources, or other financing uses. It would be other financing sources and uses if you had bond proceeds coming in. So for a bond fund, you're almost always going to see that deficiency of revenues over expenditures.
Dr. Onofre, I think your question was, did we spend more than we had? Is that right?
Yes, that's my
Okay,
question.
but I think the answer is no.
No, you didn't
we
spend out more
started
than
with
you
100.
had. No.
Okay, okay, thank you.
You can see down at the
And that-
bottom, there's a positive number. Yep, where you're circling there, that 34 million is the fund balance. It's remaining there in that. in
What's
that.
interesting is in my completely not knowing this, in most ledger sheets, I would think that the beginning fund balance would usually be at the top of the page.
Yeah, this is,
And that's where it all comes out, because this negative is,
yeah,
Well,
that's governmental accounting there is.
thank you.
That's the way that shows.
I think the confusion is that
Sorry.
this is for a short period of time. It's not that they went, spent more money than they had. It's just during this period, they spent more than they received. But that doesn't mean that that the bond itself balance isn't still legitimate.
That's a really good explanation, Bruce. You could have done it. I could have done it better. Could have done it much better, quite honestly. So what happens is we receive monies in as a revenue because we sell a bond. It may not be the exact amount. It may be much less in revenue than what we actually have expenditures for that particular year, because this is year by year by year by year. And then what ends up happening is we're still going through and spending the money doing what we got to do, but we do have a fund balance, and within that fund balance is where those dollars are actually being pulled. So it's kind of the most simplest way I know to say it.
Okay, I guess
Looks like
I'm new to this system, because usually I don't go to the store if I don't have the money to buy the groceries. So I guess with
Dr.
fund,
Onofre,
But it's not
We had
that you don't
120
have the
million in the
money. We
bank.
have the money. You got the money in the bank because you got the money that you got before, and maybe the money you got before, and you've got you've got like a fund balance. You've got a balance in your checking account, right? And you know you got that much. But this month you may not have received as much as you spent out, or as much as you received. You may have spent out a little bit more. So if you just look at it, you'll see that there was $120 million in there, and they spent 69 million. So there you go.
Thank you.
Okay. Move on.
All righty, then we can continue looking at the notes, and you'll see very similar notes with all of the explanations for fund accounting, the basis of accounting. A little mention of the fund balance. Investments, which is limited to, in this case, to deposits in the county treasury. Then there's a lot of information about requirements for the district and deposits. Receivables, payables. So does anyone have any questions about what receivables or accounts payable mean? Nope, okay. Then you can go on to note 5, and you'll see these are the commitments for the funds that are remaining in the measure. So these are all the different projects that were still outstanding as of June 30, 2021.
Curious just why on the Discovery Building, it's got a June 2022 expected date of completion.
that's right.
Oh, certainly. Our occupancy is not always when we're completed. And so that's our final closeout, and everything is completely taken care of. So so there's a period of time that we're still closing out and still finishing things. and little bits and punch list items and others that we have to finish up and with DSA until we can actually get to our final, certification for closing.
Okay, thank you.
Have the ones that were supposed to be completed in December 2021, have those been completed now?
Yeah, for the most part there, I think there's a few, especially with the HVAC projects. Some of those have lagged. I think we've talked in the past about supply chain issues that have slowed down delivery of air conditioners, for example. So there may be a little bit that's gone beyond that. I mean, this was obviously a projection. And for the purposes of looking at the financials, we're looking at when are we going to spend the last check? It's an estimate. I mean, you can see they're basically beginning of the year or middle of the year. So I wouldn't say with certainty that those are completely closed out, but all of those are either there or very close.
Okay.
Just as a draft disclaimer, the Shiloh and who's joined us now, welcome Shiloh. Shiloh and Kelly are putting together these drafts in the month of December too. So it's kind of between November and December, it's kind of moving target. So the drafts are happening as things are occurring as well.
So we'll move on to the opinion that I explained a moment ago is because this is a governmental audit. So this opinion would be the same as the one we discussed with Measure BB, except of course this is related to Measure ES. No comments.
So I just, you flew right by it, but that there was a statement there that the district is not involved in any litigation relative to this bond measure. Is that what it said?
Yes.
Somewhere up there. Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Oh, there it is.
All right, then we'll go on to the performance portion. And this is the same auditor's report that we saw for Measure BB.
Here's the phrase that I think you're looking for, Bernice.
Yes. And as I mentioned earlier, we do test the expenditures with the bond measure in mind. We do make sure, of course, the bond measures are pretty broad generally, but we do test them and make sure that they're in compliance.
Is that still the 87%?
This one will have a different percentage. Let's see what this one is. This one's 86%.
Whoop.
It is in number 4.
Kelly, if you don't mind me jumping in, just because this one was the one that was unique where it did have the transfer out. When we do see that type of activity where you're taking proceeds from a bond and transferring them out of those bond funds somewhere else, we do actually factor that into this testing, meaning we looked at that 16.1 million, it's coming out of this bond, where is it going? And is it going someplace that really still qualifies under the bond language, that those monies are going to be used for eligible projects for the bond. And in this case, we knew that it went to Measure BB, and those measures are comparable in terms of the projects they're servicing. And so that is part of this piece of the audit as well, just analyzing that transfer. I just wanted to point that piece out.
Sure.
Thank you.
And before I step away, I really wanted to say thank you to Gerardo and Ashraf for all of the help that they provided during the audit.
More so Ashraf, I give her all
Thank
the
you.
credit.
You're welcome.
Yeah, Ashraf was very helpful.
You're welcome.
Shall we move forward to SMS?
Absolutely.
Skylar, do you want to take?
I was going to
SMS?
say, you did such a beautiful job. I like your presentation. I think I picked up a few tips from you.
Oh, thank you. Let's hear yours though. It might be a little different.
Well, mine might be a little shorter. Sure, I can take measure SMS. So I think Kelly probably went through for you the purpose of the independent auditor's report, providing you with assurance about our financial statements related specifically to, in this case, measure SMS. And so the financial statements, the financial statement opinion for measure SMS is an unmodified opinion, meaning it's a clean report on the financial statements. And I listened to Kelly give the description of that emphasis of matter, purpose of which just making sure everybody understands if they're looking at this report that it really only represents measure SMS and not the district as a whole. So, but it is a clean report with respect to measure SMS financial statements. And this measure is a little bit smaller than the last one that we saw. So you ended the year with just about $1.1 million to spend with the current money that is sitting in measure SMS. So you go to the next page on the income statement, you'll see how that, measure how SMS was a little busy this year, right? This goes back to that conversation regarding revenues versus expenditures. Over 47 million spent in measure SMS for the year, so it's been very busy, winding this current issuance down for the year, but with about $1 million left. And I think some of the footnotes in this particular one, if you want to go ahead and scroll maybe to that construction commitment note, I think would be a good place to take us. I think that one really shows on the horizon what's on the horizon for SMS. So a little bit more. All right, so it's going to be a split page, but as you can see, I just said you only had $1.1 million left in measure SMS, but look at all of the commitments you have out there. And if you continue to scroll to the next page, you'll see how that continues to be. And I think it was somewhere to the tune of 50. Where's that total at the bottom? We can go back if we need to. I think it's like 52 million. So there's a note right here at the bottom. I mean, how do we have commitments to spend 52 million if we only have $1 million in there? And the note at the bottom really points to the fact that you still have issuances or proceeds available to draw on. And so these commitments will be fulfilled through future bond issuances, which I think if you go down to note 6, you will see that this really pertains to the subsequent bond issuance that was authorized in July of this now current fiscal year. So the monies that are coming out of the 200 million that was issued July 1 are not reflected in these financial statements. So that's really how the remaining 50 million will be funded, is this new issuance that hits your books in 2022. Any questions on that piece? That was maybe one of the little unique pieces with SMS.
Yeah, so that event was one day after all these statements?
Yes.
Couldn't you go one other day and put it in there?
Well, that's why we like to include that as a subsequent event note, just so that we know it did happen. But I see your point.
That's what our bond folks told us was the right moment to sell for the best rate. So.
Are you sure of that?
Yeah, we set it up and we said we knew we needed to do it. We were going to do it after this fiscal year, after last fiscal year, beginning of this one, and they said get it as soon as possible after the fiscal. It's like so.
Oh, so that was the next day, basically.
Yeah, then that was the day that they said we'll get our best rate. So.
And then you have your internal control report on financial reporting, and so this again, the report here is designed to identify if there's any deficiencies in internal control, and if you just keep scrolling to the next page. So in this particular measure, we do identify what we refer to as a a control deficiency that we classify as material weakness. Now, this is related to the fact that we had an audit adjustment to the financial statements at the end of the year. And, it's really one of those things where if you have an audit adjustment, we generally associate that there's control deficiency because we forgot to do something maybe at year end in the year-end reporting that resulted in the audit adjustment. In this particular case, if you continue to scroll to the next page, we do lay out the details of that in what we refer to as the finding in question costs. I think this particular case related to just setting up an accounts payable, making sure that all of our liabilities at the end of the year are recorded. So we had an accounts payable balance that we didn't get recorded at the end of the year for about $519,000. And so that adjustment was made, and that's why you have that finding.
Was that a single item on the accounts payable? Was it multiple items?
It's a single item.
Thank you. I didn't know.
So how did that mistake get made?
If we don't get the invoice on time to record in 2021, then this happens. Probably we got the invoice way late in August, middle of August or something, and it didn't got caught into 2021 fiscal year. It would show in 21-22 fiscal year.
Not all of our vendors are great about submitting their invoices on time, and our project managers do push them to try to get them at least to get the numbers so that Ashraf can record it, but it obviously doesn't always work. We had a similar finding on Measure M for the same reason.
Thank you.
And then just to note that the district is required to, right here on this page, which I'm sure I'm stealing Shiloh's thunder, we are required to officially respond in the audit. So that's where we have a corrective action plan and the official response so that it's recorded in the audit.
Thank you, Gerardo.
It's a long one. We wanted to make sure it was thorough.
That's bothering you. Can you go somewhere further away?
Oh, okay. So if we keep moving then through the rest of the financial audit, you'll come to the performance audit, which, as I always say, this is probably the part that I think as an oversight committee you're most concerned with, whether or not the funds were spent in accordance with the ballot and approved by the voters. And so as you can see the results, we did find that the funds were expended as approved. We didn't have any exceptions in Measure SMS for compliance. So that is a clean report on performance. And then if you want to see your percentage, then we can scroll to that. Let's see the next page after this one. We did this. The first page really just kind of goes through what we're doing, what's the purpose, why we're here. And then the meat of what we're doing starts with the methodology. And we talk through those details for you, exactly how we pick our samples. And this one was a 73% coverage, which, in the audit world, there's not really ever a defined percentage that is considered the right percentage. When you're using sampling techniques that are approved in our industry, then you're not really focusing on a percentage. But I do believe that for all of our bond audits, because of the dollar amount of the expenditures, we get pretty high percentage coverage, which I think just helps the comfort level for purposes of your review. 73%, while it's lower than 87% or 86%, is still a really high percentage of coverage in an audit. So I think that's, just want to note that.
Who decides what percentage that you take? How does that determine?
It's not. Really, the percentage is just the outcome of using your sampling techniques. So our sampling technique really is laid out in number 2 above. So we really look at the total expenditures and we calculate, and we don't really divulge what the dollar amount is, but we use our standards to determine what an individually material item would be. If we say we're looking at total expenditures of 50 million, what would be an individually material item, right, in relation to 50 million total population? And then every single transaction that is over that individual amount, we would test. And then we'd look at what's left, what's in the remaining population. And then we're going to scrutinize that a bit more judgmentally, but we're still going to scrutinize it. Are we seeing vendors that look abnormal for a bond? Are we seeing projects that look, that descriptions look like they don't fit, or descriptions of expenditures that look like they don't fit within the measure? And we really kind of pick out pieces as we see necessary, but we make sure that everything that's individually significant is audited. And then the rest of it is just very judgmental.
So you're just saying significant, that's a dollar amount?
We calculate a dollar amount. We don't divulge those secrets. We don't want the district to know and really be able to predict that and then make decisions based on knowing our dollar amount.
Okay.
We keep it a secret.
Yeah. You'll tell me after the meeting.
we like to stay unpredictable. And if we did have findings, then they would be on the pages to follow. And there are none.
Okay, any questions? Okay, any questions on any of the bond audit reports?
I don't have a question, but I'll just chime in. Some of you who've been around are probably thinking, well, why are we getting this so early? Usually we probably get this in April or May or March. Well, we're trying to switch things up a little bit more, a little bit different. We wanted to give both for the district audit, for the financial oversight committee, and for the bond audit for the bond oversight committee, opportunities to see working drafts of all of the audits in the event there was some type of feedback or comment or question or concern that we felt it was material enough to make any changes or edits to the audits. We know that the Board of Education values the work that both of our oversight committees do. So we wanted to provide the opportunity for these drafts to be reviewed in draft form before they are finalized and published to the board and submitted to the state. So in the future, we may try to get these, Carrie and the team will try to work to get these to you earlier, maybe like in November and December, because in years where we don't have extensions to complete the audit, I think they're due by December 15th, right, Shiloh? So we have an extension these last 2 years because of COVID-19 is getting an extension for almost everything. So next year, we're hoping to get this group together to look at audits in the draft form a little earlier, which Kelly and Shiloh are probably thinking that's going to be tough, but we're hoping to do that. I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that, Carrie.
Okay, so I thought that the January 31st date was the date. So when we talk about future meetings, we'll go ahead and schedule something in November or beginning of December. So. Yeah. So, I mean, because essentially we want to have it done, then we need to have it then done by, well, if that's true, then do we need to have it done by the 2nd November meeting of the board?
Probably for this committee's purposes for November, I think we usually get the audit on the December 15th board meeting, because that's at the same time as our first interim.
Okay.
And again, we just want to make sure the draft passes through the committee in case there's any substantial tweaks, so that by the time the Board of Education approves it, they feel a little more comfortable that their oversight committee on both the bond side and the financial side have reviewed it in full detail.
Terrific. That will be important later on when we talk about our scheduled meetings for the year.
Okay, does anybody on the committee have any additional questions? If not, then I need a motion to accept the bond audit reports.
I move that you accept the bond audit reports.
I need a second, please.
I'll second it.
Thank you. All in favor of accepting the bond audit reports indicate by saying aye.
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 Are there any noes? Are there any abstentions? The bond audit reports pass. Thank you all, committee members. And now to the most exciting.
And just thank you, Shiloh and Kelly and Gerardo and Ashraf. Right. So yeah, thank you all. And unless you just feel like hanging around for our fun and a good Brown Act training, we appreciate you.
Oh, they
Thank you,
should stay for
everybody.
the Brown Act
All right.
training because it's really a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Thank you. Have
That
a good
being
night,
said-
Have a
everyone.
good night.
Thank you.
Thank
That
you.
being
Serene
said,
does a good show. Thank you all very, very much.
I am
Bye.
fun.
we are now on to our Brown Act training. So take it away, Cherie.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me tonight. As Carrie mentioned, and as I was introduced, I am going to provide a Brown Act refresher for those who have received a presentation before, as I'm sure many of you on the committee have, and just go through also some recent updates that occurred over this last few months. So if I'll share my screen, hopefully everyone can see that. I'll put in the presentation mode.
Could we have the link to your presentation in the chat?
I'll defer to Carrie and Steve on that. I'm not certain how to do that as I sit here.
I think we can, Serena, if it's okay with you, if we can get it as a PDF, we could distribute it to the members.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so Dr. Onofre will, after the meeting sometime this week, we'll get it from Serena and send it to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. My name is Serena Abrahamian. I'm with Orbach, Huff and Henderson. And again, just giving the Brown Act refresher tonight. So moving on to the first slide, what is the Brown Act? The Ralph M. Brown Act, also referred to as the Open Meeting Act, was enacted in 1953. And of course, we have the code sections there for you, government code sections 54950 through 963. What is the purpose of the Brown Act? So it's really to provide some structure to the conducting of meetings such as for legislative bodies and committees such as this one, to ensure that these meetings remain open and public. All of the deliberative processes of bodies such as the CBOC should be open and available for public scrutiny, and all persons should be permitted to attend any meeting of a legislative body or local agency. And moving on further and providing a little more background into the purpose of the Brown Act, it's to ensure, again, that these meetings of governing bodies and local public agencies are conducted openly and transparently, which is the most important part, to keep the public informed of the actions, debates, and views of committees such as yours, and again, to provide a procedural framework for meeting, debating, acting, and listening to constituents. A question we often get relating to really a lot of board appointed committees is, are we really considered a legislative body, quote unquote, for purposes or under the Brown Act? And the answer is yes. You're an advisory standing, well, more of a standing committee that has continuing subject matter jurisdiction or fixed meeting schedules. And I think in this case, it's both. And you were created either through a formation resolution, formal board action to form the committee and appoint the members. So you are a legislative body that is subject to the Brown Act. Applicability, and this is a really important point, and why there's so much training that goes on, especially with new members to committees, is that once elected or appointed in this case, officials are expected to know the requirements of the Brown Act even before taking office. Member of a legislative body or local agency includes any person elected to serve as a member or who has, and even those who have not yet assumed the duties of office. So it's a key component. It's important to know what these requirements are and what you're, and how to comply with them and stay in line with the Brown Act requirements. What is a meeting under the Brown Act? And this will be the gist of the presentation, I think, for the next few slides. So traditionally, what is considered a meeting is any congregation of a majority of members of a legislative body to hear, discuss, deliberate, or take action. Of course, I think in pre-COVID, a lot of that occurred in person, of course. Now we kind of have to expand our thinking on this. So this includes, of course, teleconferencing and virtual meetings as well. So any use of direct communication, personal intermediary, or technological devices employed by a majority of the members of the legislative body to develop a collective concurrence, it can be considered a quote unquote meeting. And in the next couple slides, we'll talk through a test that's typically applied to determine what is considered a meeting and to assist you in making that differentiation. But also to note that telephone, email, virtual meetings, social media, all of these types of modes of communication, you could end up in a situation where there is developing a collective concurrence that could equate to having a quote unquote meeting. And again, we'll touch on more examples as we move on in the presentation. A good way to kind of differentiate also when we're talking about what constitutes a meeting is, of course, substance versus procedure. So procedural or administrative matters do not typically constitute meetings because they don't involve substantive discussions or topics that are within the subject matter of the committee or subject matter jurisdiction of the committee. We've got some examples here, communications that are limited to providing information. For example, in a board meeting, sometimes you get a superintendent's weekly report or updates. Procedural or administrative matters like scheduling meetings, determining agendas, and those types of items are typically outside of what we're typically concerned with when we're talking about what constitutes a meeting under the Brown Act. And this is the test that I touched on a couple slides back. Meetings, developing a collective concurrence, how to think about this in terms of, I think, somewhat relatively easy to apply test. If a discussion can potentially contribute to developing a collective concurrence, it likely constitutes a meeting for Brown Act purposes. Even if the committee members do not participate in a discussion, the mere act of listening may contribute to developing a collective concurrence. And again, we'll touch on some examples as we move through the presentation. Some common scenarios that are likely meetings, and again, to kind of expand your thinking a little bit about outside of just a traditional sitting in a meeting room where a majority of the members are present and talking about things that the committee is tasked with or is under their subject matter jurisdiction. Messages in which a majority of the committee is copied, and this can also include forwards, replies of electronic messages, and all of these things may constitute a serial meeting. The hub of a wheel, so consecutive conversations through an intermediary to poll the committee. A daisy chain, when you have one person to another and then to another polling members of a committee. And then, of course, listservs in which a majority of the committee may post comments and responses. This is more in line with a blog, but you see there that there's a note to consider Assembly Bill 992, which we'll move on to next. But because there was a lot of, I guess, questions and structure was required around social media interactions on January 1st, 2021, and you can see there which amended Government Code Section 54952.2. AB 992 clarifies which social media interactions are not in violation of the Brown Act. And again, touching on what I said a second ago, providing some structure and clarity to interactions that may likely already be happening, because as you can imagine, in this often virtual world that we're living in, there are a lot of social media interactions occurring. It's applicable to all social media platforms that are open and accessible to the public. So that, of course, includes Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all of the above, any that you can think of, and online services that allow for public interaction, chat rooms, comment sections on blogs, and online media. So what did AB 992 do? Committee members under these provisions may answer questions and provide information to the public or solicit information from the public regarding a matter that's under their subject matter jurisdiction. But along the lines of what we talked about regarding the test we went through, a majority of members may not discuss amongst themselves a matter within that body's subject matter jurisdiction. So that can include even comments or use of digital icons after a member posts something, for example, whether it's on Facebook or another social media platform. But it goes a step further. Committee members are prohibited from communicating directly with other members regarding any matter that's within the committee's subject matter jurisdiction. And again, when we talk about commenting, I think this and communicating, to think a little bit and expand your thinking on this, that includes digital icons, emojis, thumbs up, anything that can convey what the committee member is thinking or feeling about a topic. And these provisions will remain in effect, as you see there, until January 1, 2026, unless further extended, which of course we anticipate that they will be extended, and maybe some further structure or clarity will be brought to new forms of social media interaction. Moving on, here are some common scenarios that are likely not meetings. So we talked about scenarios that are meetings or can be considered meetings, of course, if they meet the test. Here are some scenarios that are likely not meetings. But again, this applies when provided that a majority of the members do not discuss amongst themselves business or that is under the subject matter jurisdiction of the legislative body. So of course, individual contacts or conversations between a member of the committee and any other person. And that's kind of in line with what we saw for AB 992 provisions as well. The attendance of a majority of the members at a conference or similar gathering, just a general meeting for topics of general interest to the public.
952-64-9.
Community meetings, the attendance of a majority of the members at a legislative body, open and publicized meeting. Public entity meetings, the attendance of a majority of members at a legislative body's open and noticed meeting. Of course, this is referring to another body's noticed and open meetings. Parties, the attendance of majority members at a party or purely social or ceremonial occasion. And district meetings. There are other meetings of other committees that the district regularly hosts and conducts, including board meetings. And again, committee members, a majority of them can attend as long as they're not, if we apply the test, it wouldn't be considered a meeting where they're discussing, a majority of them are discussing what is under the subject matter jurisdiction of that committee. Moving on to agenda requirements under the Brown Act. So this, and as you see and are familiar with the agendas you receive from the district or you participate in putting together, 72-hour notice before a regular meeting is what's required for, and posting is what's required for to comply with the Brown Act. And then 24 hours before a special meeting. Agendas should contain sufficient detail to allow the public to determine whether to participate. So what's being discussed should be well identified and laid out. There are some exceptions. This is not all of them, but just some examples of exceptions to standard agenda requirements. Of course, if there's an emergency and an item needs to be added for that reason, if there's a need to take an immediate action that arose after the agenda was posted, or for example, if there's a brief announcement or a brief report of activity to be given. So what's occurred over this COVID-19 period with regard to open meeting requirements? And this is just for some background. Under Executive Order N2920 and the preceding orders, legislative body members could attend regular, special, or emergency meetings by telephone or video conference. There's always been the ability to teleconference, but only when certain requirements were met. This, of course, loosened those requirements. The order suspended requirements that normally apply to teleconference attendance. But of course, you still have to comply with the 72 or 24-hour public notice, what we just discussed relating to agendas and when those should be posted. And members of the public are, of course, have to be provided with methods for observing the meetings telephonically or electronically. Order N0821 extended these flexibilities through September 30, 2021. And right around this time, or of course, leading up to this, there was the question of are, for example, school districts and other public agencies going to be able to continue to take advantage of, or if they choose to continue to have their meetings occur electronically or through a virtual platform, if they can still do that. On September 16, 2021, the governor signed into law AB 361, which answers that very question. Local agencies can continue to conduct public meetings virtually during a declared local or state emergency without having to rely on the executive orders that we were seeing come out of Sacramento. A local agency that wishes to utilize these remote meeting provisions must find that the state of emergency continues to directly impact the ability of the members to meet safely in person, or that state or local officials continue to impose or recommend measures to promote social distancing. What's required is that every 30 days, a new determination has to be made by the board if they're continuing to have virtual meetings, that of course that sorry, I got a little bit tongue-tied, that one of the above two factors is still in place, and for that reason they would like to continue having meetings electronically, or that teleconferencing, the need to teleconference still exists. Unless further extended, AB 361 will sunset on January 31, 2024.
Serene,
Yes.
is it accurate that the board makes the determination for all board appointed committees? In other words, this committee doesn't actually have to do anything. They're just going to follow the board's direction, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
There have been some, what we've run into a little bit though, is of course then the timing of all of that has to line up. So like and I think it has to be very clear in the resolutions that that is the case, right? That the board is making that, and that would apply to the committees as well. There have been a few instances where there have been questions about that when it comes to committee meetings, but of course that's, you know, that goes to the resolution being drafted in a certain way that makes what you just asked, Steve, very clear.
Okay, thank you.
And then just the last couple slides, and hopefully this will never happen because you are getting Brown Act training, and we hope to avoid situations where there's a violation of the Brown Act. But a note that misdemeanor liability does exist if it's found that there was an intent to deprive the public, because as we touched on, the entire purpose of the Brown Act is to ensure that committee meetings and these types of public in public forums are conducted publicly, and that the community has an opportunity to participate. The public can sue to stop a violation of the Brown Act. Some remedies that could possibly be taken advantage of: audio recordings of closed session is a possible remedy. Of course, that applies to board meetings more than a committee meeting like this. The agency must be given an opportunity to cure, and then an action taken in violation of the Brown Act can be nullified. And then just a couple more points: that the DA or any interested person may commence an action to stop or prevent violations of the Brown Act, and that the court may award court costs and reasonable attorney's fees to the plaintiff in the action. But again, hopefully we don't have to ever be concerned or worry about these, but just to provide and close that loop. And so that is the presentation and the update. Of course, I can answer any questions that you have.
Does anyone have questions for Serene?
Nope.
No one on the committee?
I have one question, not specifically related to this committee, but since you're the expert in the Brown Act, the superintendent can form an advisory committee. Are those committees under the Brown Act?
So typically the board will form the committee, has to vote to approve the formation of a committee. Yes, and I think we had a slide that touched on that, but let me just go back to that for a second, because I think so. And we get this question often because I think as it relates to Citizens Bond Oversight Committees, 7-Eleven committees, we're seeing a lot of closure and consolidation committees that are being formed now. But because and you see there, it includes what's considered a legislative body that's subject to the Brown Act, includes advisory and standing committees that are created by, which is typically the case for school districts, by resolution or formal action of the board. and that have continuing subject matter jurisdiction, and in this case, fixed meeting schedules.
So Serene, if I could maybe help, I think I understand what Dr. Nofre is asking. At times, the superintendent creates kind of an ad hoc superintendent's committee to
Oh,
advise
okay.
him on things that are, they may be subject, they may be related to the subject matter of the board, but they're community members that that the superintendent has put together to inform him, not to inform the board. And I think that's what, Dr. Nofre, please clarify if I'm wrong, but I think.
Yes, just one example, for example, the Finance or Budget Advisory Committee, but it is an advisory committee. Very specific that the superintendent formed. We all know that he had an advisory committee, and he has other advisory committees. So I read somewhere that they are under the Brown Act, but I couldn't find my notes. But see, now over here, I can see that those committees that he forms, because they are advisory, they are under the Brown Act. I think that's how I understand.
Yeah, I think the title, it might not be the best to call that, and I'm not sure it was called the Budget Advisory Committee. I think it had another name. But there is a distinction between those that the superintendent forms and those that the board appoints.
You're right. You're right. I'm talking about the superintendent committees advisory.
Yeah.
Not the board, because we are the board, you know, we
Right.
are, you approve by the board. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Serene, thank you so much. It was very informative.
Thank you. Have a great evening, everyone.
Thanks, Serene.
Thank you, Serene.
Bye-bye.
So our next
Thank you. Good
agenda
job.
item is public comment. Is there any comment from the public at this point in our meeting?
I haven't received any. Carrie, did you receive any?
I have not received any.
We don't have any members of the public, so it seems super unlikely.
Okay, then we shall move on to the next agenda item, which is the program updates. Carrie and Steve, take it away.
Carrie, can you let me share?
I can share. Oh, do you want to share? I'm asking to share the agenda unless you want to share.
I think we're going straight into the financial reports, so I can walk through those easier if I'm.
Oh, okay. You got it.
Thanks. Okay, well, let's see if I did this right. Are you seeing BB?
We are now seeing the BB report.
Okay,
It's
thank
a
you.
little small. If you could make it larger, that'd be grand.
I don't imagine that's making a difference, is it?
A little bit.
Maybe you can share this report also. In the past, you used to share,
I believe you've received it today.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you have to expand your window.
Okay, I'm gonna maximize my window and see what we can do.
What are you doing working on a Mac?
I really don't know. It's frustrating to me too, Carrie. Okay, believe that's about as big as I can make it.
Okay.
It's legible.
Okay, so the BB report is pretty short, pretty straightforward. As you'll recall, we've got this column is soft cost expended in the prior reporting dates, and then our cost expended as of 12/31 will be this reporting period. So you'll see on this first page we have no hard costs and no soft costs reported. On the second page, we have some minor soft costs related to closeout of old projects and a few hard costs on Olympic closeout. That's DSA compliance is our closeout projects. But you see that totals about $8,000. Then we've got, again, a few more soft costs over here on modernization of Building E at Lincoln, which again is an old project. That's actually, it is also related to DSA closeout. It's just that the items above that say DSA compliance, those are actually like legacy projects that just were never closed out in the past. So we're going through the process of doing that. On our third page here, we're getting a few more expenses. The bulk of the spending, of course, in Measure BB is the one remaining project that we have active, which is, or was at the time, the Malibu new admin and library building. We spent about 100,000 in soft costs, about 1.9 million in hard costs. We're wrapping that project up. You know, it's, as Carrie mentioned earlier, we occupy a project when it's ready, a building rather, when it's ready to be occupied, but the project itself continues and there continue to be expenses as we close it out. Another example of that is down here at Samo High. This is the innovation building, science and tech building. We spent $9,000 in the last 6 months. And again, that's a kind of a follow-on thing to just clean up a little bit on that project. And overall, you can see that we spent about 2 million and say 50,000, and about 2 million of that was the Malibu middle school project. Now, if I can figure out how to change my screen, we'll look at the other one. Let's see.
When do you think the BB oversight will come to an end?
But I think in the, this fiscal year, I think.
Yeah.
As soon as you're done with the money and as soon as you're done spending it.
Exactly. Okay, so are you now looking at an ES report?
Yes.
Yes.
Wonderful.
It says yes.
Okay. So obviously we've had a bit more spending in Measure ES. Excuse me. I'm not going to go line by line, but there are a few anomalies that I want to point out because they're, I should start at the first page. There are a few anomalies I want to point out because they stand out, and one of them in particular is weird, but there's an explanation for it. So again, you will have this, but you can see the hard costs and soft costs that we've expended in this reporting period. Not a lot on our first page here. Our second page, you know, of course, again, the bulk of our spending in that period was the big project that we have going forward, which is the Discovery Building. About 440,000 in soft costs, almost 14 million in construction costs. That building is now open, but we will continue to be spending money on that. We've got a few change orders to close out the project, as well as, you know, final inspections and things like that. The anomaly that I was mentioning is here. So you'll recall that this column is expenditures, and we're showing a big negative expenditure, $2.8 million. That it doesn't mean that we, you know, got money back from the contractor. What that means is that we had state funding on this project. You never get money back from the contractor, but so we had state funding that came in on this project. It came in during this last reporting period, somewhere around 3.3 million, I think it was. Is that, do you recall, Carrie?
Yeah, it's close to 3.3.
Okay, in that ballpark. We did have expenditures, but the balance was a net negative, which is actually positive for us because it means our expenditures on balance were less. Well, it ended up in us getting about $2.8 million more than we spent in that period. Now that was to pay for the project that we've already been building. But when you see this negative number here as an expenditure, it's really, and I'll add a note over here, but it's really to reflect the state money that came in. And then now here on our last page is our summary sheet. It shows here as part of the summary because that's a summary from it should be on the sheet before. It's the bottom line of the Santa Monica Others. But the actual bottom line is our total expenditures were 11.5 million, and you need to add back in that 3.3 million, so it's more like 14.8, and our soft costs about 1.1 million in the last reporting period. So, actually, Michael, this is probably where we should wrap up on this, because we have our next, sorry, I'm trying to pull you back. There you are.
Yeah.
We separate BB and ES and measure SMS. So if it's okay, we'll come back and do the measure SMS unless you'd like me to do that now as well.
No, that's fine.
Okay. So with that, I think if there's questions about that, of course, we'll answer them. Otherwise, we can move into our updates.
Okay.
Okay. So item 2 here, our Malibu High School project, the campus improvement project, is that building AB that I mentioned, the middle school building that's in use. It's generally been very well received. Craig could probably chime in a little bit better than I could, but my understanding is everybody likes it, and we're using it properly.
Yeah, absolutely. It's lovely.
Any negatives you've heard, Craig?
Well, other than the little water problem.
Yeah. So
Other than that, no.
not
It's,
perfect.
yeah, it's not perfect, but it's extremely well received, and I think the students, the parents, the staff are all very happy with it. Especially considering, because of the delays, it wasn't exactly designed contemporaneously, so it rolled out. A whole different generation received it than the generation who designed it. And even then, I think it still is meeting the needs. It's also, just so you guys know, it's a little crossways, because when it was designed, there was no vision of doing a separate middle school and high school. So we're sort of retrofitting the fact that it was built to say that's a middle school building, and then the high school campus will go elsewhere. In the grand scheme of things, it'll be absolutely fine. But we're a little higgledy-piggledy because we didn't have a whole campus plan when that was designed. We had a very specific vision of a very specific building. But it's absolutely lovely, and now we do have a campus plan, and people are wildly excited to keep it rolling forward.
Thank you, Craig. It's way better than the update I could give. So now moving on to our Samuel High projects. As we mentioned, the Discovery Building's open. Students have been in it since beginning of the year. I struggle to say it was completed on time, but I will say it was put into use when we planned to start using it. You know, most projects do experience some delays. Because of COVID, we had some weird things that happened. I mean, in some cases we were able to work faster because there's no kids on campus. So, you know, we could make more noise, we could take up more space, and they did. But we also had you know, there were times when an entire crew couldn't show up because they'd been exposed to COVID. We had supply chain issues not allowing us to get the materials that were needed. So there were, and those things don't always balance out. But the contractor was able to complete the work in time to get students in there when we needed them. So overall, a good result. Again, I think that's a building that's been extremely well received. You know, there are elements of it that are somewhat unique, like the stadium stairs inside, but you know, sometimes you see kids hanging out on them and using them kind of like we had hoped. So anyway, it was a good project. And
is the swimming pool being used for competition now, or just practice? Or
It's being used by the school for competition. Last time I was there, the girls varsity water polo won a game. So it is being used by competition. We have not opened it up yet for the community, but that has more to do with with the city not quite being ready for it. We haven't completed our agreement, and we're still working out a lot of details as far as how we share the pool, but the goal is to get it open for the community use also. And just to say about the building, I mean, it's a very progressive educational building, and it is functioning in a great way. I mean, I'll send you all a link to a really great video that was done on it that sort of tells you all about how it's working, and it's a phenomenal experience. So it's very good.
Since we toured through it, it would be great to see a video of what it's like. That'd be great.
That's a great idea. And in fact, we could always do another tour so you can see it when it's finished. That would be, I think, really perhaps at a future meeting.
The tour includes swimming?
Yeah, you could absolutely swim.
Yeah, we'll have a tour and you can bring your suit.
Okay.
Thank you. So our next item is the Exploration and Gold Gym project. That's been trucking forward. You'll recall that's phase 3 of the Samuel High campus plan. It replaces the practice gym with a new gym along Pico. And we're building the Exploration building, which will have our, do we still call it capstone, Carrie?
Our academies.
The academies, thank you. which will have the academy programs in there. The building has been designed and submitted to DSA. We have hired the contractor for it. They've completed completed one round of pricing on the design that was submitted to DSA. The price was significantly higher than expected, not just higher than we expected, like it was a guess. It was a lot higher than our architect's estimate, and frankly, it was higher than our contractor's original estimate. But these are market prices, so you know this wasn't them now coming back and saying, "Oops, it costs more." This was them coming back and saying, "We bid this work out, and here are the costs." That led to some tough discussions, including one that concluded with, "If we don't fix this, we don't have a project." I think our entire team took that very seriously. So our management team in-house, as well as the architects and engineers and the contractor, really buckled down and have revised the design significantly, to the tune of cutting $20 million out of the project. So it wasn't, you know, let's use a cheaper paint. I mean, these are big cost differences.
Are we going to see the change in plans then, or?
So interestingly, most of it is not observable. In other words, the building's going to look like it looked before, but there are a few things that are. So for example, we're going to have a lot less glazing, a lot less windows on the gymnasium, which is a benefit, frankly, for other reasons. But we did reduce the glazing there. One of the things that was changed, in fairness, was a deferral, not a reduction in scope. So the South Gym, which is our current practice gym, originally when we laid out the campus plan, it needed to be demolished before we built the new gym. When we that left us without a gym, that was an actual real problem. So our architects looked at some options and they said, hey, you know, if we scoot it this way and we move this thing this way, we can build the new gym while the old gym is still in place. And so we've gone forward with that. However, we still kept demolition of the old gym as part of the project. It does need to happen at some point, but it doesn't need to be paid for from this bond. So that element of work, for example, was deferred to the next phase. Ideally, it'll follow right after construction anyway, but that is something, for example, that I want to bring up that wasn't a reduction in cost. It was just moving the cost. But a lot of the changes were to reduce cost, and they got the project down on budget, at least theoretically. We don't yet have a final cost, but they've been working with their subcontractors. So, you know, the general contractor, they build the project, at least in name, but they're not out there swinging hammers and welding and digging holes. They use subcontractors for that. So they've gotten their subcontractors on board and worked with them to reduce the costs. And again, in some cases, it's like the floor decking. So it's going to have concrete floors, but there's a particular type of decking that was specified, and the subcontractor came back and said, you know, if we use this one, it's going to save a few $100,000, same performance, just different brand name. Now, it may not be identical performance, but it's the same level of performance. And by performance, I mean, with floor decking, we're worried about the acoustics. So they were able to show it meets your objectives and saves money. We go forward with it. And, you know, it's a small example, but they did that hundreds of times over. And again, hopefully we're going to end up with a project that's on budget. That's in DSA right now for review. Now, what went to DSA was the set that cost $20 million extra. So we do have some work to do to go back to DSA now with these changes and get them incorporated, but our architects have been working very hard on that. And I understand they're making great progress with it. Okay, so that project we expect to, I think we expect to bring it to the board to award. Remind me, Carrie, is it April?
April 1st, yeah, first meeting in April.
Okay, so we anticipate being able to award that project in April and then moving straight into construction. But we have done a few things to try to help the timeline. So much like you may recall with Discovery Building, prior to having a final approved set of plans and a final price, we moved forward with some things, and those things were very distinct. They were demolition, grading, excavation, That's about it, because there's not a lot you can do without a permit, but it turns out those things you can do without a permit. So we've done some of the demolition. We've removed the history building and the cafeteria. The contractor's been excavating like a big pit for, the gym kind of tears down, if you'll recall. So they have to excavate along Pico. And they're really getting the site ready so that once we get approval, once we have a final approved set of drawings and we get the contract approved, we can go straight into construction. We've also faced a lot of material cost escalation. So the contractor has suggested to us, hey, we know that the steel is going to be this, so we can put an order in to the steel for steel now, lock in the price and lock in the schedule. Because if we wait until April or May to order the steel, we might have a 4-month delay or a 6-month delay. So they've identified certain elements of either long lead items or elements of the building that have significant potential for significant cost escalation. And the board has approved moving forward with those elements of work, not to install it, but to get it under contract, and in some cases to start procuring those materials. And so we've had, I think, 2 change orders, 2 amendments to the contract to get those going. And so far, again, it's working well. I mean, we're very reliant on getting out of DSA on time to get this building finished on time, but we're trying to, I don't want to say we're trying to accommodate delay. We're trying to get everything that we can out of the way so that as soon as we have that, we can get going with the project.
Sounds like you guys have done a lot of work.
We're trying.
Steve, can I ask, if everything goes as planned, when did you want to start this?
January, but didn't go as planned. So,
Right.
So we're actually looking, though, if we can award in April, we would get, I mean, there is work ongoing now, but again, it's stuff that doesn't need a permit.
Right.
If we can get it approved and get it awarded in April, then we would start construct, the kind of construction you can see immediately afterwards. So April and May.
And how long is this project?
So our goal is to have it opened. I'm going to screw this up because I always screw up 23 and 24. Our goal is to have this open at the beginning of the 23 school year, correct, Carrie?
January of 24.
January 24, okay.
Yeah, we're not going to quite make August of 23. It's just a little too much of a rush, and we want to allow the paint to dry, which we really didn't do with Discovery before we opened. So our goal, if we hit all the marks, is we'll make January of 24. We might be able to get the gym a little bit earlier than that, but we think for the academic building, that's our goal, and I think we're going to hit it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I did screw up the 23 and 24 because there's a very real possibility that it would be August of 24, unless things go perfectly. And we know that that's not likely.
Things go well. Let's say well.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be perfect, but
Let's not ask for perfection.
Sure, but barring any significant impacts, then the schedule Carrie laid out is what we're tracking.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. So now, unless there's questions on Samo High, we can go on to the James Performing Arts Center.
Okay.
Carrie, do you want to give this update, Carrie? Because I know it's near.
Sure. Sure. So the John Adams Performing Arts Center is open and operational. It is phenomenal. I just saw a video that we've created in-house for it. I don't have it yet. I'll have it. It's going through the final approvals. I'll send that out also to you when we get it. We've had a number of performances and events, a number of school things, some rentals there. We have not been able to do the grand opening. We keep rescheduling the grand opening at different times, and I was hoping we were going to have it end of February, and then with COVID we delayed it, and so maybe after this we'll try again and schedule another couple of performances that we'll do for a grand opening. So we're trying to schedule that up. It works great. The performance lab, the space out front, the courtyard area all really works, and the theater is beautiful. It has wonderful sound, great lighting. It is a real gem and a great benefit to the students. Backstage areas, choir room, the music folks just love it. And the dance people and everyone who's used it really, really is very, very happy with it. We're still waiting for SMC to use it. They haven't. I think we're scheduling something for the Broad to use it coming up. But it's working really well. It's a great space. Can't wait for you to see it.
Great, thank you, Carrie. So now moving on to our window paint floor projects. The work there is progressing, and you're going to get tired of hearing me say supply chain issues, but we again face supply chain issues on our HVAC projects. It led to some delays on some of the work, but we're getting through them. Recently, there's been an issue with the HVAC at Mirror Smash. It is not yet complete, which normally wouldn't be a huge issue, except for COVID. So that project had for some reason, on all of our projects, we've been requiring either MERV 13 filters or the highest level filter that a piece of equipment can accommodate. On that particular project, the specifications required MERV 8, which is still a very good filter. And in normal times, it's perfectly fine, but it's not what we intended to put there. However, the contractor did put in what was asked for. Just the the project documents asked for the wrong thing. We've since remedied that. We've purchased MERV 13 filters and installed them in the few areas that didn't get all of the filters installed. We've rolled the standalone HEPA filters back into place. And I believe that's all copacetic now. Carrie, do you feel the same?
Yeah, we're providing appropriate quality air filtration now in that space. And we've actually installed a lot of we're back up to the MERV 13 filters in most of the places. We just have a few more rooms to go and check. I think we're just waiting on 1 or 2 filters that were back ordered.
And yep, I think that's right. But I think they actually have them now. So, okay, so I think that they're installed or will be shortly.
Oh, sorry.
What's that, Carrie?
Yeah, I'm trying to mute because I'm trying to.
He's muted. Okay. So with that, I think we can, unless there's questions about ES and BB, we can roll into our SMS updates.
Okay.
Share one more time. Oh, I closed it. Give me 1 sec so I can open document again. My apologies. When I realized we weren't using this last time, I closed it instead of just minimizing it. That visible?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. So obviously this is the same format as the other reports. And we've got our expenditures during this this reporting period. Our largest expenditure was phase 3, the exploration and gym building. You can see our encumbrances here are a little larger than expenditures, but this is the demolition, the abatement and demolition work that was done last year, and then some of the grading that would have started prior to the beginning of this year. Our interim repairs and upgrades projects, those are kind of the small projects all around that we've been doing. You may recall that the JAMS auditorium is partially funded by Measure SMS. So some of our expenditures here are paying for that JAMS auditorium project. Again, I don't want to go line by line, but I do want to hit kind of the bigger points. Our HVAC projects that we referenced earlier, and I need to look at this agenda again, because we list projects under, we used to do them all together, and now we need to be breaking them apart between SMS and ES. So the updates that I just gave you under ES were actually for some of the SMS projects, and you can see those here. So we've got, well, the Lincoln Electrical project is one, but our HVAC projects down here, particularly Mirror Smash, which is the one I talked about a little more, is actually an SMS project. again, those are moving forward. We're getting near completion on those. And then there's a few little adjustments here that we've made on FF&E. We have FF&E, if you'll recall, is our furniture, fixtures, and equipment. We've installed new furniture, the 21st century learning furniture throughout the district now at all of our campuses. And it's kind of unique looking furniture in some cases, but it's functional and it allows the classroom to be more functional and to be, they're modular, so they can be moved around a lot easier. They're not these old 70-year-old desks that are that we sat in or even older. So anyway, those I think have in general been, I think, very well received. We in order to make them well received, we work very closely with teachers and staff to make sure that we were selecting something that would work for them, and it appears to have been successful.
In many ways, it's been transformative for the classrooms, and particularly in COVID when they needed to adapt and change to different sort of layouts and setups. It really has made a difference with giving the teachers a lot more options on how they teach students in the room. It's a great thing, and I'm also going to send you a video in a minute of all of our Will Rogers modernizations that talks about what we've done to the entire campus. There's a really great video that our new communications technician has created for us.
Thank you, Carrie. So overall, our expenditures in this last reporting period were about $29 million. About 25.6 of that was hard costs. If there's no questions about it, we can move on to the next thing. Okay, cool.
I just wanted to say, so all of these videos you keep talking about that the communications people are developing, are they going to be just like up on the school district website, available up there?
Yeah, and I think now we're creating great videos, but now I need to make sure that the distribution of them is working. I was just noticing that our really great video on Rogers modernization has 14 views on YouTube, and I think I'm 4 of them. So I need to figure out why we have not been pushed them out. I was just looking at that going, this is a great video. Why has it not gone out yet? So I'll work on our distribution and making sure those are findable. Yeah, that's my next email after I send you all the link to these 3 videos.
Okay, so moving on to the project updates. The interim projects under SMS, they're things like the library, which you actually got to see. I think our last meeting was there. The Barnum Hall acoustics, which was it's an interior project. It was adding acoustical drapes that can be lowered and raised to change the sound of the room. And then, again, there are always some minor things on campus, but we actually feel that we've gotten through all of those minor, we used to call them Band-Aid projects, interim upgrades. But we think we've gotten through, I want to say all, but I hate using, absolutes like that. So, but we don't expect many more to come up.
Oh, they keep finding new things, but yes, I don't think we have much more money for more at this time.
Right. We need to stop that. So, okay, so
Come on, Antonio has a new one already.
Great. The exploration and goal gym update. Again, I gave it as part of the Measure ES, but just pretend like you're hearing it right now. The district-wide FF&E, that I did talk about during the financial report. As Carrie said, it's been really transformative.
It will complete this summer with Mirror Smash. That's the last school to be done. Because of construction, we couldn't get it done. So they have their new furniture coming. So that elementary middle school furniture project will be completed.
Thank you. And then now looking forward, we've got a number of projects that are coming as part of Measure SMS. And they're the campus plans, which I think all seen or heard about. This goes back over a year now. And there was a big push for a historical resources study and inventory to see if we can to see if we need to either avoid any buildings or preserve the buildings, I guess. Carrie, I think you're probably better suited to
Sure.
update this than I am.
Certainly. So we have received the revised drafts on the historic resource reports for most all of our elementary and middle schools in Santa Monica. They're enlightening and they're good and they're helpful. We found some things. It's an interesting thing, and these are going to be published in February, so you'll be able to read them and see them. There's an interesting thing in there. It's not really so much that we have buildings that are savable, but we have historic districts at a lot of our schools. So the sort of the containment, of how they were done, when they were done. So it's like, and that's an interesting thing because it's usually not done for K-12 schools. It's more colleges, neighborhoods, a block of businesses. So it's an interesting thing to sort of look at it as a historic district, but we're taking a deeper look at that and that's set up. So like I said, those will be published in February. And then starting February 28th, we'll start with 5 schools, Rogers, McKinley, Franklin, not Roosevelt, Rogers, McKinley, Franklin, Grant, and John Adams will be the first 5, and then we'll follow up later with Lincoln and Roosevelt. We'll have community meetings. So these are in-person community meetings happening starting February 28th. There'll be about a 2-hour walkthrough of the campus. What we find is that a lot of people who have a lot of interest in these campuses, either they want to improve them or they don't want to change anything, or they want some building saved, or they don't really care about that, but something else. Many of these people haven't been on our campus. And so we talk about it in an abstract, but I think that's why we've put them off until we hope that COVID sort of calms down a little bit, so we can do a physical walkthrough of the space and really point out the condition of the room, so they can say, yeah, when you look at that particular building, you go, that building, it needs help, and this other one, oh, look, they did really great work on this one. That one's in a great educational space, and so we can compare, because on every campus, there are our flowers and weeds, we might say. So we want people to see that, and those will be meetings where people will be able to walk through, talk about the historical resources, talk about what the next projects are, where those are, talk about the conditions of the campus, and then what future projects might be coming up in years to come if there were another bond measure or something. So that's what's coming up for us. As far as the first projects or the SMS projects, we have about $80 million worth of projects. All of those have gone through what we call schematic design, which is the first part of the 3-part design project program, and they're ready to move forward into design development. We're actually probably going to next Wednesday, there's going to be a special meeting. We're going to say we're ready to go on most of these projects. We do have a little bit of a delay on Roosevelt, because you might look at Roosevelt and go, yeah, what's so special about Roosevelt? But the reality is it was the first of that type of school. It's significant by a significant architect. And so where the campus plan anticipated removing a lot of the campus, we're going back and taking a deeper look at that campus and revisiting it. So the project there is going to have to sort of tap the brake on that project a little bit while we work it out and we come back and take a deeper look at how we're going to move. The rest of the projects can be moved forward even before because we've related, we know the historic resources are not an issue with those, but that's coming up in a discussion, and we're moving along, trying to get, even under COVID, we're trying to keep going. So hopefully that covered everything, Steve.
Very did. Excuse me. So we're also moving forward with safety and security upgrades. You may recall we've been installing surveillance cameras at some campuses. We're also going forward with replacing intrusion alarms, and in many cases also upgrading and tying in the PA clock bell system. So obviously the public address, the bells and clocks will all be integrated. We're using, I think it's called a Valcom system. We installed it we piloted it at Ammo High, and it worked really well. So we're now implementing that at our other campuses as well.
I think you have guard dogs. You have guard dogs there too. I can hear them.
I do have a dog here who normally annoys me during a meeting, but that was coming from one of the other boxes on my screen.
Yeah, I think it's coming from Michael.
It is. It's my Great Dane, and I just shut him up.
Yeah, he's got a big bark, big dog, I guess. So, anyway, so that brings us to the conclusion of the program updates. If there are any questions, either about any, Carrie and I would be happy to answer them.
No questions for Steve or Carrie?
Sounds exciting, exciting stuff going on. Exciting plans.
Sorry if you just.
Okay, well, thank you both, Steve and Carrie. That was great. Very informative and very succinct. Our last agenda item is is kind of a calendar for our next 4 meetings. And if you all have a copy of the agenda, which hopefully you do, there are 10 of these scheduled for April 20, June 15th, September 14th, and then December 14th.
I'm going to need to move up that December meeting based on the information I got earlier.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Yeah.
If I could add something in here. Generally having an April and then a June meeting doesn't make a lot of sense because at a minimum, we try to look at quarterly.
Right.
I think our obligation as a committee is to meet 3 times a year. I might recommend that, and we can keep April, it's fine, but I might recommend we do an April or May meeting and then a meeting over the summer after the close of the fiscal year, after June 30th. And then maybe, like you said, Carrie, we can have a November meeting for the audit review.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you. I think what we should do is have the meeting in April. And then if there's a reason to schedule a June meeting at that point, we will, but I don't think there will be. So let's just go with April, September, and December, unless somebody has objections to that.
Well, it has to be November, right? For the, is that what?
Yeah.
we learned?
So right now I'm looking at a November 30th meeting,
Okay.
if that's okay.
Well, why don't we try April, August, and then November?
I like that.
Okay.
Okay. So Steve and or Carrie, just revise this and just kind of send it out to everybody.
All right.
Yeah, and if you think, more towards May or end of April or whatever, that's fine. It's already at the 20th, but if you think
Right. Yeah, we're already halfway through
the
this. month.
30th is better, because you said something about May, so I don't know.
Okay. All right. I'll let those guys in their wizardry come up with the 3 days.
Right.
All right.
That's gonna be-
I have a question. I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
So the website is not updated. I was looking for the agenda and the meeting date was not there. And I'm glad we had the Brown Act meeting today, presentation. We are required to post the agenda somewhere 72 hours prior to the meeting. And I don't know where was this agenda posted because it was not in the website.
Okay, I'm going there right now because Mary Ann Solomon said it was posted and it is.
It's
Oh,
on
it
there
is?
now, right?
Okay, so I probably look at, maybe you have 2 websites, so.
So this is the bond committee. I'm sorry, the bond oversight committee page. I'll go back here. So if you want to walk through this, so from the district's homepage, you would go to department. I mean, I'm not on that page, but you would go to department. Here, I can do it. So
Oh,
go to
okay.
departments, click on
Yeah.
facility improvements. That brings us to our facilities page. Then under committees, you would click on oversight committee. And then on oversight committee, you can go to committee meetings. And the very top thing is today's agenda, which was posted more than.
Okay, no, I went through a different way, where's the advisory committees and I found,
Oh,
So yeah, so this is an oversight committee. You're right.
okay,
Yeah.
all right, thank you for sharing with me.
Oh, that's no
Okay.
problem.
Any other questions? I need a motion to adjourn then.
I move to adjourn.
Second,
I'll second it.
great. All in favor of adjourning?
I,
Aye.
You know,
I,
I just had one other question. Are the meetings going to be at the same time?
5 o'clock.
Would you prefer them at 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock?
5 works for me.
5 works for me.
I can do either one.
We'll keep it at 5 unless we get an overwhelming dissension to that.
Okay.
Okay. Okay,
Okay,
all in favor of adjourning?
Adjourn, aye, bye.
Any negatives, any no's, any abstentions? Our meeting is hereby adjourned.
All right.
Thank
bye,
you very
everybody.
much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks,
all.
everybody. Good job.
Good to see y'all.